So I used to go around the swap meets and like buy silver spoons and stuff like that and pick them up all the time. And then my brother would go to the pawn shop for me because he had a fake ID. But that was growing up in San Diego.
17 years, Rick Harrison let the cameras capture almost every corner of his family's pawn shop. Viewers watched his father, his son, and the familiar faces behind the counter become television icons. But there was one part of the Harrison family story that remained almost completely out of sight. Now, after years of questions and speculation, the family secret that Pawn Stars never fully explained has finally come to light. Why was this part of the Harrison story kept away from viewers? And what finally forced it out into the open? Join us as we uncover the biggest secret in Pawn Stars history. Built on a name nobody knew, Richard Harrison had a gift for spotting value nobody else could see. Rare coins, vintage firearms, motorcycles, other dealers wouldn't touch. He passed that instinct down to his son Rick, teaching him how to read a serial number, weigh a coin by feel, and spot a fake watch movement before it ever hit the counter. What almost no one outside the family knew was that Richard hadn't built the business alone. In 1981, he and his wife, Joanne, opened a small buy-and-sell shop together in Las Vegas. It ran for years under a separate operating entity called G&S Coin Shop, structured so that Richard held 49% of the shares and Joanne held 51%. She wasn't a silent partner brought on for tax purposes. She held the controlling stake in the business that would eventually carry the Harrison name into millions of homes. And for decades, almost nobody outside a courthouse filing would ever know that detail existed. Television changed everything about how the world saw that shop, but it didn't change what stayed hidden inside it. A documentary crew stopped by the store in 2003 for an unrelated late-night segment, and something about the family behind the counter stuck with the people who saw it. Rick spent the next 4 years trying to turn that into something real, pitching networks who kept passing. A production company eventually reshaped the concept around family dynamics playing out during appraisals, and the History Channel bought in. Pawn Stars premiered in 2009, the same year the shop itself was formally rebranded as the world-famous Gold and Silver Pawn Shop, built around Rick, Richard, Rick's son, Corey, and Corey's childhood friend, Chum-Lee. Within its first season, it became the highest-rated series in the network's history, and the four of them turned into some of the most recognizable faces on American television. Tourists began lining up outside the store every morning, sometimes outnumbering paying customers by a wide margin. A spin-off was already in development before Season 2 wrapped. Cameras followed nearly every argument, every appraisal, every deal that fell apart over a price nobody could agree on. Fans felt like they had been let into every corner of the Harrison family, watching father, son, and grandson haggle over price on everything from vintage motorcycles to Civil War muskets, certain they'd seen every side of this family there was to see. That's exactly what the show wanted its audience to believe. But there was someone the cameras never once turned to, someone whose name should have carried as much weight behind that counter as any Harrison on screen. She wasn't listed in the opening credits. She wasn't mentioned when reporters asked Rick about the family that built the business. She had signed away her controlling share of the company years before the show ever existed, in a moment few people ever learned the full truth about, and the paperwork behind it would stay buried for another 2 decades. Show producers built entire episodes around appraising a single item down to the dollar, bringing in outside experts to authenticate a signature or verify a serial number before any deal closed. That same scrutiny was never applied to the business itself, to who actually owned the shop everyone was watching, or what percentage of it belonged to someone who had never appeared on screen. Viewers spent 19 seasons learning the difference between a real Rolex and a fake one, hearing exactly how much a Civil War rifle was worth, and watching Rick walk customers through coin grading in exhaustive detail. Nobody ever walked them through what Joanne owned. It would take her own son taking full control of that empire before the truth about what she gave up and how she gave it up finally came out in a courtroom instead of on a television screen. So who was she? And what happened in that hospital room that the Harrison family spent 20 years making sure nobody found out? The room nobody talked about. The year was 2000, and Joanne Harrison was fighting for her life. According to a lawsuit her attorneys would file more than 2 decades later, she had fallen seriously ill and spent weeks in intensive care at Valley Hospital in Las Vegas, at one point slipping into a coma. It was during that hospital stay, the lawsuit claims, that her son Rick had her sign over her 51% ownership interest in the pawn shop. Joanne would later say she didn't fully understand what she was signing at the time, and that Richard had told her not to worry, insisting Rick would look out for her interests. The lawsuit itself would eventually frame the transfer as a breach of contract, arguing she had never been properly compensated for giving up majority ownership of a business she had spent years helping to build. Joanne wasn't a name fans knew. She hadn't appeared on a single episode in the show's entire run, but she and Richard had married in 1960 and stayed together for 58 years, working side by side long before any camera arrived. For years, almost nobody outside the family knew how much of the business had ever belonged to her at all. Then, in 2017, Richard stepped back from filming for good. He had been living with Parkinson's disease, a diagnosis the family rarely discussed with reporters or fans. Less than a year later, on June 25, 2018, he died at 77. Rick broke the news himself, telling followers he had lost a friend, a father, and a teacher all at once. Richard's death didn't just end an era of the show. It removed the one person who had spent years quietly reassuring Joanne that her interests were protected. Rick took control of the businesses and accounts built around the shop, including entities named Harrison Properties and Joe Rich, and Joanne inherited what remained of Richard's 49% share. According to her lawsuit, she was never given a clear accounting of where the money attached to that inheritance was actually going. Rick had been sending her $25,000 a month between 2018 and early 2020, the lawsuit states. Early in 2020, before the pandemic hit, he cut that figure to $20,000 without explanation. By March, the payments stopped entirely. The suit claims she went without any payment at all for 6 separate months in 2021 alone, including January through April, June, and October. It also alleges she was kept in the dark about a $3 million loan Rick had taken out using assets tied to her share of the business, one she says she never approved and was never fully briefed on. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in silver and cash Richard had accumulated before his death had simply disappeared from view. The lawsuit claims one of the few figures Rick never publicly disputed after the suit became public. In February 2022, at 81 years old, Joanne filed suit in Clark County District Court against her own son, along with the pawn shop itself and the entities tied to it. Rick's spokeswoman said at the time that he hadn't even learned about the lawsuit until reporters called. Rick denied every allegation shortly after, telling the Las Vegas Review-Journal the claims were false and suggesting his elderly mother was being manipulated by people around her who didn't have her best interests at heart. Season after season rolled past, and Joanne's name never once appeared in a single one of them. To this day, the outcome of her lawsuit has never been made public. Richard was gone, And so was the only person who might have kept peace between his wife and his son. But Joanne wasn't the only person connected to that shop whose story never made it to air. Others close to the family had been carrying struggles of their own that the show never let viewers see. 3 men, 3 secrets. Rick had 3 sons across 3 different marriages, though only one of them ever appeared on the show. The image the show sold was a family with nothing left to hide. 3 generations bantering over old motorcycles with the easy confidence of people who had already told viewers everything. Off camera, that confidence was mostly performance. Chumlee had his own reckoning years before most fans knew his name outside the shop. In March 2016, police searched his Las Vegas home while investigating a separate sexual assault complaint. Chumlee was never charged in connection with that investigation and was fully cleared. But the search itself turned up a dozen weapons, including unregistered assault-style rifles, along with marijuana, prescription medication, and a small amount of methamphetamine. He was booked on 19 drug possession charges and 1 felony weapons charge, facing years in prison if convicted on everything. The family was there for Chumlee, Rick told reporters, within hours, whatever that took. Chumlee eventually took a plea deal, pleading guilty to a single felony weapons charge and a lesser drug charge, avoiding prison entirely in exchange for probation and counseling. That was the one the family survived cleanly. The next one followed Corey into a jail cell for 8 hours. Corey had spent his entire adult life on camera by then, carrying more of the show's day-to-day burden than fans often gave him credit for. In September 2023, police pulled him over in Las Vegas after his truck was seen swerving between a driving lane and a bike lane. Officers reported the smell of alcohol and noted his eyes looked bloodshot. He failed a field sobriety test, and because the breathalyzer machine on scene was broken, officers had to draw blood instead. He was released after 8 hours in custody and said at the time he intended to fight the charge. 4 months later, the family's luck ran out entirely. Adam Harrison, Rick's eldest son from his first marriage to Kim Harrison, had worked at the gold and silver pawn shop years before cameras ever arrived, helping out long before his younger brother Corey became the face fans would come to know as Big Hoss. But Adam never stepped in front of a camera himself, and for most of the show's run, casual fans had no idea Rick's family extended beyond the 3 men they watched every week, let alone that a 3rd son, Jake, from Rick's 3rd wife Deanna, existed at all. Behind the scenes, Adam had struggled with addiction for years. Rick later said he had put his son through rehab 3 separate times, in 3 different years, watching him improve, only to see him fall back again, each time ending the same way. On January 19, 2024, Adam was found dead in a guest house outside Las Vegas. He was 39 years old. According to a police incident report, he had been living there alone for only a couple of weeks, and a neighbor had grown concerned after he stopped answering his door. The county coroner later ruled his death an accidental overdose caused by fentanyl and methamphetamine. Rick didn't dodge the cause of death. He named it fentanyl, a crisis he said the country wasn't taking seriously enough. He posted a photo of the 2 of them smiling together, writing simply that Adam would always be in his heart. Corey posted his own tribute soon after, saying he would love his brother forever. A plea deal could be survived. A DUI charge could be fought. What happened to Adam couldn't be undone by anyone, and it left a silence in the family no season of the show ever had to explain, because the show had already stopped explaining anything that mattered. With so much unraveling behind the scenes, it was only a matter of time before the show itself would have to answer a much bigger question: whether it could survive without the very people who had built it in the first place. everything after. Of everything the Harrison family had kept off camera, Joanne's story was the one that cut deepest. A woman who built the business and then watched her own son take it from her. But it wasn't the only wound this family carried in silence. By early 2025, Corey had reached a breaking point that had nothing to do with any single scandal. He'd spent 16 years playing a version of himself that had stopped feeling honest, joking to a reporter that at this stage, everyone on the show was really just playing a character, and that he couldn't keep pretending to be a 23-year-old apprentice while pushing 40. He chose not to renew his contract with history and left the United States entirely, settling in Tulum, Mexico, where he began building a barbecue restaurant far from the pawn shop that had defined his entire adult life. Rick confirmed soon after that Pawn Stars was no longer under contract with the network at all, and that the future of the show was genuinely uncertain. He didn't call it a cancellation. Instead, he described it as a pause, joking that he was ready for whatever came next, calling it Pawn Stars 2.0. By December 2025, that answer arrived. History confirmed new episodes would begin filming in early 2026, set to premiere the following year, starring Rick and Chumlee alone. For the first time in the show's history, it would move forward without a single Harrison son standing behind the counter. Then, on January 23, 2026, Corey's new life in Mexico nearly ended in a hospital bed. He was seriously injured in a motorcycle crash, suffering 11 fractured ribs, a punctured lung, a concussion, and internal bleeding. He spent 14 days in a Mexican hospital before checking himself out against medical advice, unable to keep affording the cost of staying. His condition worsened almost immediately. He was rushed to a second, cheaper facility hours away, where doctors discovered one of his ribs had fully separated and was pressing directly into his lung, forcing surgeons to drain nearly 3 liters of blood from his chest. He underwent 3 separate surgeries and spent 18 more days recovering. Rick had married Angie Poloshkin, a nurse nearly 2 decades younger than him, 3 weeks earlier in a small Las Vegas ceremony. 3 days after Corey's crash, the couple's larger destination wedding in Cancun went ahead as planned. Corey was supposed to be there. Still in the hospital, unable to travel, he watched his father's wedding photos from a bed in Merida instead of standing beside him. A friend eventually set up an online fundraiser to help cover what remained of his bills, and the reaction online split instantly. Some fans donated without hesitation. Others accused Corey of trying to profit off strangers after years of a successful television career, arguing that his father, still the owner of a famous and thriving pawn shop, should have covered the cost himself. The bills were already paid, Rick said, long before Corey ever put up a GoFundMe. His son was a grown man in his 40s, he added, and there was no invoice attached to what he'd given him. Corey responded publicly on social media, sharp and unfiltered, describing what it was like nearly dying in a country where hospitals wanted payment before treatment, and making clear the fundraiser was never something he'd wanted to do in the first place. The same fight that once played out between Rick and his own mother was happening again, shorter this time, between him and his son. Rick had been married 5 times by 2025, including one so brief and private to Amanda Palmer that most fans never knew it happened. He admitted openly that he had never once signed a prenup, believing every time that the marriage in front of him was supposed to last forever. He spoke about Adam often in interviews that followed, saying there was nothing worse than losing a child, and that he thought about his son every single day, still wondering if there had been something more he could have done. By 2026, the shop was still standing on Las Vegas Boulevard, tourists still lining up outside it every morning. Only 2 of the original 4 faces from that first season were left behind the counter, and Pawn Stars 2.0 was still set to premiere later in the year to carry the show forward without the other two. The cameras would keep rolling either way. Joanne never got the chance to see how her own lawsuit against her son ended. On November 5, 2025, she died in a Las Vegas hospital at 85 years old. Rick kept the loss almost entirely private, declining to comment beyond confirming it through a representative. Whatever the lawsuit was worth, whatever Rick owed her, whatever she was owed, it ended with her the same way it had played out for years, settled behind closed doors, with no public accounting of who owed what to whom. In the end, the biggest secret in Pawn Stars history wasn't a rare coin or a forged signature. It was the name on the paperwork nobody ever asked about. So here's the question this family never got to answer on camera. Was Joanne Harrison the woman who built a pawn shop empire and watched her own son take it from her? Or a mother who spent her final years being turned against the very son she'd trusted with everything? And now that fame has cost this family a brother, a mother, and years of silence, was Pawn Stars ever really about the antiques? Or was it always about who ended up holding the paperwork? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.